Just as it is with Team Fortress 2, both in name and style, the heavy weapons class is the poster boy of Hogs of War. It's the class that has the coolest helmets, the tiniest pistols, and of course, the
big ass mortars.
As mentioned in previous videos, the heavy weapons class has only seen slight changes through its history, so before we get into that, let's go through what we already know from today's game. There are 3 ranks within this class. You have the Gunner, the Bombardier and the Pyrotechnic. Each upgrade sees a slight increase in the health from 75 HP to 90 HP to finally 120. As with health on each upgrade, the inventory of each rank changes. So the Gunner is pretty lightweight. It has a trotter, a pistol and a bazooka, which is pretty simple, but when you upgrade to this class in the early stages of the campaign, you really see a huge improvement in the firepower compared to the simple grunt. So the Bombardier has the same weapons as the Gunner, but only with the additional weapon of the mortar. The final upgrades to the Pyrotechnic see the other incorporations of the Airburst and the Flamethrower, which is a weapon that is only available to the heavy weapons class. Just as it is with the Espionage class, this class as a whole is all about positioning, as there's no point in having your heavy weapons dude face to face with the enemy, as the best they can really do close up is a tiny 20 HP from their little old pistol and 30 HP from the Flamethrower. So the best place for you is to be on high ground, away from the firefights and the enemy. The long range capabilities of this class are what make it shine. This class is essentially a piece of moving artillery with the ability to take on any enemy positions depending on how accurate the player actually is. The bazooka and the mortar of course do take center stage on this, but they tend to show a slight learning curve when you progress from a gunner to a bombardier. With the bazooka, the player has free form aiming, meaning that they are not restricted in terms of the angle that they wish to shoot at. With the mortar however, the angle is restricted, so the player needs to understand that the aiming system is to do with the distance that you are from the target, and that kind of gauges the amount of power that is needed, seeing as there is no power bar. The only thing you really have is the angle, so the higher the gun is positioned, the shorter the shell will travel. And I mean, I'll go into more detail about it in an upcoming video. I've got a whole thing planned for the mortar and going on about the mechanics of it, so do stay tuned for that. But we're going to go way back now into the ancient times of Hogs of War, when the heavy weapons class was in the process of having several reworks. In the early days, this category of pig was equipped with a bazooka, a knife, a build ability, a map, binoculars, surrender, suicide and a rocket launcher. A lot of the core game mechanics in the early versions were either placeholder or simply not implemented, so it is kind of difficult to really gauge what was considered when going forward with the progress and the production of the game. But the additional abilities of being able to build stuff, the function of seeing the map from a top-down perspective and having binoculars were pretty cool, but in many ways they did seem too similar to the likes of Worms. But visually, you can see that the appearance of the pigs in general and the heavy weapons pig for the British is noticeably different. You can kind of see it, you know, because he's got some dirt on his helmet, you know. He's nice, he's nice. Moving ahead then, and we can see the implementation of the class we see today. As you'll remember from my Ace video, the Commando class was only accessible through the heavy weapons career path, and alongside their in-game names, the roster screen shows their ranks as being called Corporal, Sergeant and Lieutenant, with the Commando as the Captain. This was certainly a cool feature, but in many ways it just seemed unnecessary having the pigs called 2 different things. But as you can see from in-game, the Gunner has a drastic increase in health, which is up to 130 HP, the Bombardier sits with 150 and the Pyro with 160. Now the inventories of the class is kind of the same as it is in the current game, but the Commando is pretty insane when it comes to his arsenal, having a knife, machine gun, tranquilizers, cluster bombs, poison gas, bazooka and super airburst, which as we already know from today is just pretty ridiculous overall. But my overall impression of the ancient times of Hogs of War is that the game was just too slow. The large amount of health that the pigs had and the small amount of damage the core weapons did, they simply just did not go hand in hand, so a single round would end up lasting for a long time. As for the heavy weapons class, it's possibly one character that has remained the most consistent throughout the game's production. It has the big guns, the ones that pack the most punch and really give out the best feelings to the player who is dishing out the most damage. Once players are able to understand the more complex weaponry of the mortar and how this class should be positioned on the battlefield, they'll be able to rain hell down on absolutely everybody. And I think that the one thing I love most about this class is the fact that you can remain out of view from all enemies, but you are still able to get your shots away cleanly. Even if you're positioned on the back portion of a hill or an incline, it usually ends up being the safest place for you. So the thing to remember, use the distance to your advantage, always avoid close combat at all costs, and most importantly, learn how to best utilize all of your weapons. The flamethrower may be small in terms of damage to enemy pigs, but against vehicles such as artillery, tanks and pillboxes, it can inflict large chunks of damage. Now the bazooka has a solid 40 damage if you inflict it as a direct hit, alongside having the freedom to choose what angle you wish to shoot from. The more time you spend with the mortar and get to grips with it, the more you will be able to take down any enemies that lie in your path. As with every weapon, practice makes perfect. Overall though guys, that is pretty much going to wrap everything up here for today's video. I hope you enjoyed and hopefully learned something along the way that you didn't already know about the heavy weapons class. I'm going to be making my way through the other classes in these bootcamp videos, alongside talking about other things as well. It's one of the series that I've made for Hogs of War, so do check out my other videos. I hope you can subscribe as well, and I will catch you all later for the next one.
Ugh.